Okay. Okay, we're going to be learning the first Maamar in Vayetze. It's the Maamar of Shafti B'Shalom Beis Avi. It's a very fundamental Maamar. Let's bring up the text. Hey, Sharna, just about to start. Okay, this is one of the fundamental Maamars of Torah Or. Also, it's connected to this week as Tes Kislev, the Mittel Rebbe's, the second Rebbe's, the Alter Rebbe's son's birthday and yahrzeit in Chag Geula, which he has his famous Maamar on this famous explaining the discourse of the Alter Rebbe, his father. So we're learning the original Maamar here of the father in Torah Or. So the Maamar says, "V'shafti b'shalom beis avi." This is the prayer that Yaakov has when he's traveling from his parents' home to his uncle, and he has the vision of the ladder and the angels, and God promises him to bring him back to be with him. So he makes a vow to God, and he says at the end of the vow, "V'shafti b'shalom beis avi." If I return complete to my father's home, V'haya havaya li Elokim, then God havaya yudke vavke will be my God will be my Lord. But using the name Havaya and Elokim. And he continues Yaakov, and he says, "Va'evan azos, this stone, asher samti matzeva, that I made as a monument, Yeh Beis Elokim will be the house of God." This is part of the vow that Yaakov makes, that if God's going to be with him on the journey, how he's going to, God will be his Lord, and the stone will be a house of God. The Rebbe says, we need to understand the Shaykhis Shalevim. What's the whole connection to the stone here? What's he talking about the stone? Seemingly, this is the stone that he slept on, that he put it around his head for protection. Gam Tzarech Lahavin, also we have to understand Loshin Ha'evan Hazos. The actual Hebrew, the terminology is Evan Hazos is female. Uloshin Nekeva. Umilas Yiyah Uloshin Zachar. So in that statement itself, it has both a female and male. It says V'evan Hazos is female. Yiyah, it should say Tiyah. Yiyah will be a house of Lord. Would be a house of the Lord is male, masculine. Ulhavin kol anal, to understand this, we have to first explain. This is a continuation of what it said before, that Yaakov's on his journey towards his uncle's home, and it says Vayivka b'makom, that he so to say he met the spot, the place. Vayikach mi'avni hamakom, he takes from the stones of the area. Vayasim eraisha around his head. So he's protecting his head. The Lord of Shimon, he's protecting his head with the stones of the area. And then he turns this stone. So miraculous, the stones, the 12 stones become one stone. What are the stones? What is he doing over here? We find that it was initially a few more than one stone. It was a whole bunch of stones, 12 stones. As the verse says, Vayikach mi avnei. Avnei is plural, hamakim of the area. But Yaakov osimim evanachas, and Yaakov takes the multiple stones, plural, and turns it into a single stone. So what does this all mean? So the Torah tells us in the beginning, the story is Vayetzi Yaakov Be'er the Yaakov leaves Be'er Shava. He's going to Haran. Pirush, what does this mean? This is the journey. This is really of all we have the journey of Lech Lecha, that Avram leaves his father's home, Haran, going the other direction to Be'er Sheva. And we have now Yaakov leaving Be'er Sheva, his father's home, going back to Haran. This is really the story of the Jews throughout history, specifically the story of the Jewish people in exile and diaspora, and specifically the soul coming down to this world. This is the journey of life, Yaakov's journey. Like it says, the Avos, the fathers, were a sign of how it's going to be for the children, and in the sinas koyach, and an empowerment. So it says Yaakov. What's Yaakov? Yaakov is the word Yud Akev. There's the Yud, which is the highest level in the alphabet, because it's only a dot. It symbolizes bittul, self-nullification, also the first letter of God's name. So you're taking from the first letter of God's name, Yud, and he brings it all the way down to Akev, to the heel, which is seemingly the lowest part of the body. The Akev was known as the part of the body that the Gemara calls as the dead part of the body. The idea is to take the inner wisdom, which is represented by the Yud. Shubechinas Yud, l'mata mata, means the God's wisdom. Behind creation, the first letter of God's name, which is the beginning of the tzimtzum, that there should be creation. Again, you have to remember the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, when of the name of God, Yud Kei Vav Kei, Havaya means creator. It's the name that symbolizes the creator of creation. Elokim is how God is within creation. So the Yud is the first letter of God as creator, is the beginning of how God manifests as creator, which starts with Bereshit, it's all the beginning, which is Chachma, which is God's wisdom. So God's wisdom, starting from the highest point of the Seder Shlashos, of the chain of how things came about to be, coming into existence of creation, he brings it lamata mata. So that's like basically taking the initial idea of creation and bringing it all the way down into the lowest places of the creation as it comes into existence. He brings God's wisdom, the idea of why there's creation, all the way even to the heels of creation. So to say, the lifeless part of creation. And this is, so if that's what Yaakov is, which is Yud Ekev, so he's an entity. His avoida, what does Yaakov do? It's all about bringing the chachma, the highest point within of the creator into creation. So then Yaakov himself goes on that journey. He leaves Beersheba, which is the high point, his father and mother's home, Eretz Canaan, which is to be Eretz Yisrael, and he goes back to Haran, to the angry place of the world, to where his uncle is. Shebechinis Yaakov umamamshech, because the idea of Yaakov is to bring down from Beersheba, the well of seven. Again, the idea of the well of seven is also the seven midos, Zah, which is the higher level within the world of Atzilus, of emanation, to bring it down into the world of creation. So he leaves the well of seven, Shulamayla, which is an indication of a high place, at the level of the well of seven of Beersheba, God, so to say, his life, meaning the light, and the vessels are all one. We don't see a separation in how God manifests and shines through the vessels. The vessels are one, so to say, with the message or with the oneness of God. Although it's already starting the chain of creation, because like we've learned many times, God himself, the simplicity of God is beyond even lights and surely even greater than the vessels which define. I mean the vessels gives the character. When you say God is a kind God, or the attribute of kindness of God, chesed, that's the way the light shines through the vessel, that's defined, as we learned in the earlier parasha, especially Noach and Vayera, where the light shines through the vessel, gets the character of the vessel, but that vessel, that character is one with God. That becomes, you don't see how that's separate. It's not a separate entity from God. And he has to take that oneness and bring it down down the chain, all the way down, the madrega yeset to the lowest point. Charan, where he's going, where his uncle Lavan is, and he finds his wives, where he builds his family, Charan is the lowest point. That's why it's known as the point of anger. Anger is a result of how low it is. Why are people angry? As will be explained. As it says in Tehillim 44, verse 5, it says, Tzaveh Yeshua Yaakov. God, so to say, Tzaveh is from the word Tzav, to give a commandment. Yeshua is salvation. So there should be a salvation for Jacob. But the idea is Tzaveh Yeshua Yaakov is that Yaakov brings down the salvation. Tzaveh, Yaakov is the one who brings down that there should be Yeshua. There should be salvation. What is Yeshua? So what is the word Yeshua, which we literally loosely trans as a salvation? Also, in the word Yeshua, if you look at the letters, you're going to find there's the Shin and the Ayin, which represent Kabbalistically and in the way of Sod of the hidden idea of Nahayr Law. Means what's the connection? Shin Ayin Nahayr Law means the Shin Ayin is 370. Nahayr Law and the Great Lights. Because that's how do you have a salvation? What's a salvation? Salvation means you need a salvation, right? When you say a Yeshua, I need a Yeshua. Someone says, I need a salvation. You're in a situation where things are not good. And in order to fix that, you need a salvation, which is a kind of a higher power. What is it? Where's the power to change the situation from bad to good? Is these 370 lights, the Shinai Naharin, Ilan, that are in the salvation. Well, Bechinas Yaakov Mechaber, so what does Yaakov do? He connects the power of the salvation, the 370 powers of light, he brings it down to the heel. Again, so Yaakov's avoda is, and this is throughout, we're going to learn this is basically the idea of everything, is Yaakov is Mavri Chaticha, he's bringing everything. His idea is not that there is a concept of high lights and low lights. That's not Yaakov's avoda. Yaakov's avoda is the connector. That's why he's the midah of tiferes. The attribute of beauty, by definition, how Torah views something beautiful is the ability for it to be mix and matching. A colorful coat is a colorful, when a person dresses, knows how to mix and match colors, that's beautiful. It's not such a chachma to put on a black suit or a black dress and say, "Oh, I chose something beautiful." You could look nice in it, but if you want to see the genius of beauty, is the ability to mix and match, and that's Yaakov, the mix and match of ideas to bring it all the way down to the ikvayim, all the way down to the heels. The gam Yeshuas, the idea of Yeshua is Melashin Shah. So the Yeshuas means the salvation that comes through the 370 lights that change. I mean, again, a salvation has to change things. That's the point of a salvation, that it solves the issue, right? And then you have also Sha'ah, means to turn. Things were one direction, and Sha'ah means to turn it to a different direction. When Shekasa Vayisha Hashem el Hevel, that when Cain and Hevel make their sacrifice, God turns towards a Hevel sacrifice, as opposed to Cain's sacrifice. Also an indication of the idea of bringing God's, means turning towards not being shining in this world to being shining in this world. However, if this is the idea of Yaakov, it's Savi Yeshuas Yaakov. Okay, this is the Alter Rebbe says it in a very short pen. This idea of Tzavi Yeshuas Yaakov, of commanding, so to say, the salvation of Jacob. That Yaakov brings the salvation, but in the Mittel Rebbe's Maamar and Taras Chaim on the Alter Rebbe's Maamar, which is, if this Maamar is 5 pages, that's 30, 40 pages, because it's a complex concept. So it goes more into details of the idea of Tzav Yeshuas Yaakov. Ach v'hishtalshlus or Hashem, by bringing the light down, kolkach b'tzimtzumim rabim, to bring it down. So how do you bring? I mean, to bring down light, you have to. There's one condition, or there's different effects of how that happens. If the lights come down and just right down, so then there's no receptacle for it. So either it gets swallowed or it breaks. So Yaakov is the tikkun, he's the fixer. Again, what's beauty? Beauty is not to get lost. If a person puts on a whole bunch of bright colors, you can mix and match colors that make no sense, that makes the person look ridiculous. Right? If you put on too many colors in your clothing, too bright colors, if you don't know how to put it right, so instead of looking handsome or pretty, you look ridiculous. So Yaakov's idea is to make your person look beautiful. It's Tiferes. So how do you have to have beauty? You have to know how to bring the lights down. So he says, if Yaakov brings down the lights, it has to go through many tzimtzumim, many contractions. That could even come down to the place of charn and be effective. That's the concept. The concept is to be effective, to be radical, to just say ideas, and the shock effect. So shock effect has an initial shock effect, but then doesn't change anything. But Yaakov has to change things. He's a fixer, tikkun. He brings it all the way down to Alma de Pruda, the world of separation, which is where his uncle Lavan is. We learned last year, we learned the Maamar about Lavan. Lavan's not so simple that Lavan is the lowest point. Lavan also, Lavan is the sandwich, he's the lowest and highest point. The beauty of white is, Lavan is white. White has no definition, it could be anything. You could turn a white piece of paper, you could write anything on it. Until you write something on it, we don't know. It has a lot of potential. Lavan has a lot of potential. But Yaakov is going down to Lavan after he becomes in the corruption of Lavan. Legamri, as it says, so Yaakov is like the river that leaves Eden, which is again the Yud, the highest point of God's wisdom. The point is that the water has to come down to plant the garden. And from then it continues to separate. Like we learned in last week's Maamar about the separation of the 4 rivers. The idea is, and this is by design, that God wanted that there should be a world of separation, and Yaakov, i.e. the Jewish people, are coming in to bring the light. Savi Yeshuas Yaakov. This is avoda of all the Jewish people. That's why I said the story of Yaakov, specifically in this parsha, is the story of the Jewish people. The whole idea of the diaspora, the whole idea of why we're here in this world, is Savi Yeshuas Yaakov, is to bring down the salvation of Jacob, which is to bring down that in the world of separation, as things separated, to bring down the oneness of God. Started with Avram, but Avram started in Canaan. Yaakov went back to Haran, to the dark place to do it, because Yaakov could bring it all the way down to the heel. The Yaakov Avinu also, he draws from energy from Avram. It says, Akev Hashem Avram Bekoili. Avram also had the idea of Akev, that he was able to bring God down into the Akev. But Yaakov does it on a consistent level. And the idea also of Yaakov is not that he's the father of the tribes, that it becomes the avod of every Jew. Yaakov Avinu, Olav Shalom, and Yaakov our forefather. The idea is to bring back, is to go to the separation and reunite things. So now we're starting to understand what's this have to do with the stones. Not enough that the upper worlds are united and one, that even where there's lights, vessels, and the essence of God is all one. Even in the world of separation, that's the chachma, that's the wisdom here. That's what Yaakov is really doing. That everything is one when the light is shining, when the emes, the truth is clear. That's one thing. But how do you bring the truth into the world of lies, where there's so many stones, so many different ideas, and turn it into one stone? That's Yaakov. So Yaakov is not enough. He wants to be down in this world. The oneness. Ubita, what does it mean, the oneness? How do you have one? You have to have a nullification. Just like it's above. That the lights and the vessels all are one. And how does he show this? That he immediately starts to take from the stones of the place to make it a single stone. What are stones? What does it mean to take the stones? Stones are letters. Stones are called letters, and we'll explain in a second why. Like it says in the Sefer Yetzirah, which is the book of formation. Some say the author was First Man or Avram Avinu, one of the first books of Kabbalah. That says with 2 stones you could build 2 houses. With 3 stones you could build 6 houses. Just like from many stones you make a house. The idea is to take the stones and create a house. Once you have a house, one could live in there. So 2 letters are like stones. Meaning to say what we're Chassidus, and again, Tanya goes into this in large about the idea of the power of the letters. Why is it a stone? Because the stone is lifeless. Letters are lifeless. You can make many. You could take, if you have 22 letters of the alphabet of the Hebrew alphabet, they can make many words. Some words make sense. Some words are deep ideas. Some words are foolish ideas. Some words are nice and kind words. Some words are horrible and hateful words. Right. So how you mix and match the word letters together. And then there's the tone, even in the same words. That's why it's a house. A house means it creates an idea. But the stones themselves, the letters themselves are seemingly lifeless because you could do anything with the stones. But you need to build the stones together to create a house. So many stones build as an idea. I mean, many letters, you put them together in the right formation, with the right tone. That's why when we talk in Chassidus, we don't just talk about the letters. We have the letters, the vowels, the crowns, and the notes. And there are different levels within Hashem's name. Why? Because it's not just the letters themselves. The vowels help bring more understanding to the message, and the tone, the note of how it's being said. When you can have 2 words together. But if the notes are going in opposite directions, it's saying something else. When the notes go into each other, one who knows the notes of this is how the person who reads the Torah has the sing-song. Those are not just ideas, those are notes. And the notes is the tone of the message. So when it's a hard note, he's saying something. So like how a person talks, right? You can say, look at the words. I didn't say that. Yeah, but what was your tone in that? I don't like your tone, people say, right? So just like stones are lifeless, seemingly the lowest idea is a stone. It has no life. It's not a vegetation that grows. It's not an animal that runs, that has life. It's not a person that speaks. Nevertheless, from the Dal Yisodis, from the 4 levels, the stone is the lowest. Domem is the lowest, the lifeless, Sameach, something, the vegetation. Chai means the animal kingdom. Medaber is a person who speaks. Different being that has the seichel, the mind. So too, the letters in reference to the intellect, to the idea. So they're like lifeless. So you have, and then there's many ideas, there's many concepts here. You have a lot of people that have great seichel, great ideas. They don't know how to form the letters together. And when you have a cryptic idea, what's the idea of cryptic idea? We have this at the end of this week's parasha, when Yaakov and Lavan make the gal, right? So just like the stones can make walls and houses, it also makes heaps. And heaps are different than houses. Heaps are just a whole bunch of stones making a heap. That's a gerbil. That's just words that don't make sense. And the idea of the words that don't make sense is a purpose to it, that it becomes a separation from what the person who really knows what the idea is to the other side has no idea what you're talking about. So it separates the light. So words are very powerful. They're very important in the communication, but it's not the seichel itself, because like I said, you could talk foolish things with the word, the same letters. So the seichel is the wisdom of it. And then, so the seichel is really the life and the idea. The letters are doimim, are like stones compared to the idea. You can't compare the letters to the idea, to the intellect. So we see the idea that Yaakov took the stones means he took the letters. So too, it is also how God works. Meaning to say that there's, the Chinuch Sivit says, let's see inside. Dvar Hashem Shemayim Nasu. In the word of God, means the utterances of God. Heavens came into creation. Means the idea, the beginning of creation says, Bereshis Bar Elikim. God uttered, Baruch Sha'amar, God said, V'haya Olam, the world came into existence. God is king over creation. Meaning, what does it mean God is a king over creation? That the life force in existence, in creation. Shem Olam is at gates, which are many, many worlds. Like it says, can you count the regiments of God? But how does it come into life? Because also the letters, unlike the gal, the heap is just literally, the purpose of the heap is not to communicate ideas, it's actually to block ideas. Yaakov and Lavan, they're blocking ideas. Yaakov has to break through the heap of Lavan. That's the Hasidic discourses at the end of the parsha. But they're all really interconnected. But when you have even ideas, for instance, right, the smart person who wants to either in communicating to a student who can't understand your great idea, so you have to find the right words to really narrow down the light of the idea, and that's why we have examples. When I say, for example, a mashal, what was Shlomo's wisdom? He was able to give deep idea examples. He was able to give thousands of examples until from deepest levels of godliness to bring it to be understood. So the words are not just a form of communicating the full idea. It also knows how to narrow down the idea. And that's the idea of Malchus Cholam, God's king of the world. I mean, say the creation, how does creation come into existence from God's infinite to finite? It already starts to go into interaction with the words. Like a person who holds back a lot of information. And you can simplify an idea with words. And the kingship is even more simplified. Because a king doesn't have to explain why he's doing something. He's the king. He just says it. It comes into being. And that's the level of God's utterance. That keeps things in existence from something to nothing. It's the words that keeps it into existence. Because, like I said before, it's finite. It's limited. Baligvul. And not only limited in our existence, but in our comprehension. It's also the space. Like it says, from heaven to earth is 500 years. And how could the creation, even on the highest levels, be comparable to the infinite light? By definition, Ein Sof is no end. And here we just said 500 years is a defined space of time. As it's revealed, even a little bit of that's more revealed in the higher worlds. So how do we come into existence? Just like a person who's not so smart, who doesn't have so much information, to get some information from the great, so to say, teacher. It has to simplify it in the words. So too God simplifies the light in the words, so we should be able to accept it, not just in our comprehension, but also in our existence, that we could exist as a separate being. It means even if we sit there today, each one of us as individuals, and have different body shapes, male, female, etc., different minds, but if it was shining through us the infinite, we would cease to exist. Again, what Yaakov was trying to do is to take the separate words and re-put them as a single word. It means even if you separate ideas and simplify it and break it down into letters and words, and now it's a whole bunch of stones, And especially if you separate the letters, even it gets simplified, where it's brought out in other places. Then the world of creation, the letters don't even make sense anymore. They don't even. It's like, for instance, if you have the word, it's an example given the Moishvai Seichem, right, in your place of dwelling. So it has a whole bunch of letters. To put them together, they create a word. It already starts with an idea. But if you take those same letters and separate them, you have no idea what the word is. There's no light there. So little light. That's how it continues to get broken down and broken down. Yaakov wants to put all those letters back together and keep them in their separation. To keep them and to in the ideas to reveal the godliness. That's Yaakov's avodah. To take the stones, all that separation, and make it into a single idea, meaning to say, yes, you exist as a separate being. Yes, you have different ideas and different feelings. The 7 parts of the menorah, the 70 extensions of Yaakov, right? There's the 12 months of the year, the 12 tribes, different ways, different entrances into the temple. So as you are in different stones, you become a single stone of idea. You're not separate. It's like a person, it's like everyone knows their mission, their specific job with the single mission of making this place Beis Elokim, a house of God. So he says, like it says, Kadosh Hashem Tzavakos. God is holy and the Lord of hosts. What does it mean, Lord of hosts? As the rabbis of Taurus, Ois is only one letter, in his regiments, in his army, so to say. Elef Alfim, like I said before, Elef Alfin Yisham Shunai, Viribir Vavin Kadmai, there's tens of thousands who serve me or before me. We said before, can you count God's regiments? But at the end of the day, they're all limited. They only come from a single letter. One letter, how far is one letter from an idea? It's almost lifeless. The Gabi Shem Avaya to the name of God that creates them. That's infinite. When the world comes into existence, in all this separation, in tens of thousands of levels. How they come into existence is all depending on how you mix and match the letters to create words. And we know that if one is to open up the Bereshis, the beginning of the Chumash, until the end of creation, the 7th day, Yom HaShishi, right? So we have all different God's utterances of creation. Not everything that's created is uttered. For instance, like it says in Tanya, the word stone that we're talking about, Evan, there's no word Evan in Seder Bereshis, in the first chapter of Bereshis that talks about creation. So how did stones come into existence? Because in the utterances that were there clearly, some things like God said, let there be light, let there be the heaven, the grass, the trees, the things that we do have, those are the clear utterances. But if you rearrange the letters within the utterances, that's even more of a concealment, because it wasn't even uttered clearly. It's just the letters that are mixed around, like Scrabble. You can make other words. And what do you make? You make Evan, you make stone. It's not hard to find, Aleph Beis Nun, which makes stone. So it all depends on how you put together the letters. And the word of God. When you mix and match the letters, you could create words. And those words bring things into existence, which are Bali Vul V'Nifradim. And because it's just like almost lifeless letters and words, so they don't feel the connection, how it's a single idea. Means that's how people feel at the end of the day, like we spoke many times, Avodah Zarah. Idol worship. It's not that you're serving the stone. You feel so separate. You're trying to find something that's going to benefit you and your separate being, right? It's fundamentally the person who serves an idol was serving themselves. You're just finding the mirror that's going to be listened to you to try to be the funnel for your source of your own needs. This idea, that idea, but it's all about how you serve yourself. So because there's all this separation. But Yaakov Avinu, so what did Yaakov do? He took all these scattered stones, scattered ideas, scattered words. He wanted to elevate these ideas above. He took from the stones, imagine, what's the meaning of Ma'avni Amakim? He didn't just take any stones. He took stones from his location. Took the words, the narrative, the speech. You go out there in the world, what are people talking about? What's the talk? What's the language today? What are people saying? What ideas excite people? So Yaakov went and took from the Avnei Hamokim, from the stones of the place, the place that he was in. Everyone lives in their time. And you're taking from the Avnei Hamokim, from the stones of the time, of the place. Shem Oisis Harbia, many letters and words. V'asamim Even Achas, he wanted to make a single concept, a single idea. Shehu Ois Yud, Shehu V'yasim Rashaisav, and he wanted to bring them all back to their initial letter. Because of the letters, the most undefined letter, the most essential letter is the Yud. Every other letter is an expansion of Yud. Different ideas. The Hey goes into a square. The Reish goes into only two sides. The Ches has no opening. The Kuf is a long leg. The Yud is in every single letter. It's the fund. It's the dot. It's the nekuda. It's the point of every letter. So he doesn't even want to go into any kind of form of any other letter. Go back to the original letter, which is the Yud. A Yud expands, it becomes a Vav. So Yaakov wanted to come make it a single letter, not just a single letter, but the single letter of Yud, and to elevate it v'yasem mirai shaisav, and to put it by his head. This is like a person within themselves. Means what is the stones within yourselves? It's not just also ideas that are outside, but there's a lot of stones in you, right? So but in a person below. We have our ideas, our wisdom, our intellect, and we have our emotions. You have to remember they're not the same thing. The proof is that sometimes when there's an override of one or the two, there's too much seichel, there's too much intellect, and there's no emotional connection to the ideas. And sometimes there's a surge of an emotional feeling that's beyond intellect. You can't even rationalize it, and you can't control it. So we have seichel midas, we have our mind, our intellect, and our emotions. But how do you feel them? How do you express it? How do the ideas come into your thoughts? How do your feelings come into your feelings? You need letters and words, right? So and the letters and the ideas, so to say, the letters clothe the ideas and the feelings, that the intellect and the feelings express themselves, clothe themselves in the letters, in the words. Sometimes you could only have it. We learned also, again, there's all the Maamarim. These are the fundamental weeks of the ideas of Chassidus, of the difference between Rachel and Leah. Rachel is the word, Rachel is the world of the thought. Leah is the word, Rachel is the world of speech. Leah is the world of the thought. So, sometimes Rachel has no children. She can't communicate. Sometimes, in the world of thought, you have a lot of ideas. You don't know how to articulate them again to communicate. There's letters in your mind and letters in your speech. They're not always the same thing. Someone's just telling me about a technology they're coming out with that people even who can't speak, not because of autistic reasons, but they came out with a technology now to let people to help people talk the ideas that they have. So you have a lot of ideas. These are all the letters that the ideas enclose themselves in. So too by God, we have the way God manifests within Chacham Bina Das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, and then we have the 7 midos, attributes, feel emotions. But the way they are by God, they're in a way of wisdom, not in a way that we understand. Maven in a way of understanding, not of our understanding. And God doesn't have the same, so to say, emotional breakup that we have. Over there, the emotions are not separate from God. They're an expression of God. They're one, totally nullified. Like it says, to you is the greatness of Chesed. God manifests one within his emotions. The emotions are responses to ideas. They're not always one. And we regret a lot of times how we feel or think about things. Because how could you have regrets? Because it's not one. And the word of God that comes, that brings into creation, is how God's wisdom and midos and attributes go into the letters. These are the 10 attributes of Hashem, both intellectual and emotional. And what is the letter Yud of all them? Nekuda is the small dot. The essential wisdom, that's the starting point of all creation. Bereshis, the beginning of everything, is the Yud. That's, like I said before, the Yud is in every letter. Is there. It's totally nullified, meaning to say, from the Yud expands into the Hey. The Hey already has space. But if it loses its yud, then it separates the wisdom, the understanding separates from the chachma, from the bittul, from the nullification of God's expression. Like it says over here. Sorry again. The yud represents God's wisdom, which is the total ainu bittul b'tachlis, totally nullified. So the letter itself shows you how it's nullified. It has no shape. Then it shapes out to the hey in God's name. Expanding width and length. That's like the idea of understanding. So in a person, you have the inspiration, which is the chachma. But the inspiration of an idea needs to be broadened. What's the point of the broadening it? A, to make sure it makes sense, see how to apply it, how to do it. So you're broadening it in both width and length, which is bina. So too, all the ideas and the emotions of God come out in letters, but the all letters are connected to the yud that are totally batal, nullified to the essence of God through the yud. And Yaakov wants to do the outcome of that created separation through the process of the letters. And what was created wasn't just separate lifeless things, but separate alive things. That the people, the things that came into existence in their consciousness, even the animal consciousness, animal consciousness is less separate than the human consciousness. But the human feeling totally separate from Hashem. Or turning something that's a vegetation into a way of building a house of God, right? He says, I'm making a house of God. It means turning the things of creation to be a vessel for godliness. He wanted to take all the separate ideas that God created to make this world of separation, but to bring back the consciousness of the Yud. Again, he's not destroying the world, but he's bringing the Yud into Akev. He's bringing the Yud and by making it a single stone, he's showing that the consciousness of godliness in every part of creation is there. The Yud is there. He's showing you the Yud in every letter. To bring it back to God's initial wisdom, and he makes this a monument. But the idea is once you're able to go back to your consciousness of Hashem, but then simultaneously you go back to the Vav. The Yud comes back to the expansion of Vav. What's the idea back extend? What's the Vav? To Hamshacha, to bring down. Yes, you have your own special way. Each person was created in their own unique manner, with their own build-up and makeup. Some people are better at other things. Some people are better at intellect, emotion. Everyone has their own avoda. Every man and woman has their own avoda. That's the Vav. That's the expansion. But you have to never lose sight of the Yud within you. And that's what Yaakov wanted to be. First, he brings it back into the single Yud, and then Vayasem Oisem Atzeva, he makes it into a monument to bring the Vav, to expand from that consciousness, keep the consciousness, and now expand. He expands from the Yud to the Vav. Because the idea is, go out to the world and to take the worldly things and turn it into Torah mitzvahs. You can't do a mitzvah if not on the cloth. Tefillin is not an idea. It has to actually come into form of something that you take the skin of the animal and turn it into tefillin, a sukkah, candles, building a home, a Jewish home, a mikveh. All these things are coming in a physical space. You can't immerse yourself in a spiritual concept. You have to go into the physical water. So, there's no tmunis eis vav shal roish nikudas hayud. What is the vav? The vav is of all the letters. The only letter that really remains single in the shape is the yud and vav. Everything else expands out in different directions. The yud stays the yud, and the vav just keeps on going. That the leg goes down to become a vav, and it goes all the way down. It's a long nun. The Islamic begins Chach Milah Lamata begins our mitzvahs connected to Munis Aizvav Shal Reish Nikudas Hayud. V'achar Choylech Mashech Lamata Kumaykin Reis Mechach Manafkas. So too he shows how Torah comes from God's wisdom, and that you have the mitzvahs in the worldly abilities to take Gashmias and make it, and specifically you have to take Gashmias, physical things, and turn it into mitzvahs, into commandments. V'nimshech Mispash Lamata B'dvarim Gashmi has to come into physical things. That's why he continues. He pours the oil on the monument. What's the idea of pouring the oil? So he takes the stones. He gathers them, makes them a single stone, reconnects the consciousness of the Yud in our existence. But from that consciousness, we don't stay bottle, nullified. Then we start psachli bi b'sar secha. We expand to the vav. We go out and become someone. And take that, but with our consciousness, go out and create the Torah mitzvahs. And then he pours on that the oil. What does that mean, the oil? So he says, Shemin hu b'chinas chacham ilah. Again, that as it becomes a monument, he anoints it with the upper wisdom of Hashem, like it says Shemen Mishchas Kodesh, the anointing holy oils. The Eskila b'chinas chacham ilah mamash tamata b'chinas matzeva. It's not enough just to have the action of the mitzvahs. The oil is to bring mamish to God's wisdom in the Torah mitzvahs. Means that the problem is that if the person becomes nullified, almost like a dry letter, and goes into the vav, into the Torah mitzvahs, you're not going to have the chayis. You're not going to have the vitality, the life of the Torah mitzvahs. Pouring the oil it becomes Shem Mishchas Kodesh. He anoints it. The mitzvahs are alive with the wisdom. It's not just a dry letter anymore. That it's all alive with the mitzvahs and the laws, and even down into the laws of not just laws of mitzvahs of making things holy, but even how you go about your day. If you're going to make a separation, what is love if you decide to exchange your cow with someone else's donkey? What's the halachic view of how one makes that exchange? It's not just an exchange. The Torah tells us how the exchange has to happen. It's God's wisdom in not just into making material things into holy things, but how you just go about your day. There's God's wisdom in those things. The idea is it's not just that God is telling us this is the rules of how to live. God's great wisdom comes into these scenarios. It's almost as if the scenarios exist of exchanging your cow for your donkey is just different ways of God's wisdom coming into the world. You're connecting to God's ideas. Kosher, is this thing permissible? Possible, forbidden. It shouldn't just be dry. You should realize this is God's wisdom. That's the idea of the pouring the oil on it. As it is above. Like it says, that when the Jewish people received the Torah, we say, when the people stood, they stood in awe and fear. So too when you sit there with your colleague and you want to make a business exchange of your donkey for this person's cow, you're standing there in the same awe because God's telling you in the Torah. You open up the Bab Metzia and you open up the Shulchan Aruch and Choshen Mishpat and tells you how do you make this exchange? Seemingly, what's the point? Okay, fine. So Torah tells we have Torah laws that tells us how to make the exchange. What's that have to do with godliness? It's not holy. It's a business exchange. Yes, that God is found in that business exchange because the Torah tells us how we're supposed to exchange a donkey for a cow. And you stand there with the same awe by performing the Torah's law of how to go about it. That's why when we talk about where's the essence of God found today is in the Dal Damish Halacha, in the space of the law. What does it mean, the space of the law? Why isn't it saying that in the house of prayer, when you pray, because that's when you're talking to God. When you're thinking a Hasidic discourse, thinking about godliness, no. You want to know where you find God is in the four cubic spaces of the law, and the law includes laws like exchanging your cow for your donkey for the other person's donkey. Seemingly, how can you compare that to a person standing in the synagogue, is praying to God? Because God's great wisdom beyond how you understand comes down in this simple exchange of your donkey for the other person's cow, and you stand there in the same awe because when you're exchanging it the way the law tells you to exchange it. You're actualizing God's wisdom in creation. That is just like when he stood there and he heard the laws, he heard the Ten Commandments. Al Har Sinai, when he stood by Mount Sinai, they stood there in the fear and the awe. They saw the revelation of godliness. It wasn't just ideas. He heard it from the essence of Creator. Anoichi Hashem leikecha, Am Hashem your Lord. Afkan, so too when you sit there in the space of the law, in the space of our lives. So when the Torah comes in and clothes itself, again, not just in the holy mitzvahs, but Pasha in the laws of how we go about our day-to-day lives. But going through the way the Torah shows us how to live our lives and living it that way is bringing God's wisdom out. That when a person says, I can't connect. Some people say I can't even connect a mitzvah. Never mind to how the Torah tells me to exchange my donkey. But even a mitzvah, I want to be able to pray. Here's saying, surely the mitzvah where you're actually doing God says put on tefillin. God says light Shabbos candles. So this is God's telling you to do a mitzvah now. But even in the laws, there's no mitzvah. The mitzvah is that you're listening to the Torah, how to go about making the exchange. No one's forcing you to make the exchange. But when you do it the way the Torah tells you to do the exchange, Torah literally encloses itself in the physicality of it. That's God's wisdom. This is talking about when I'm going to put my words in your mouth when you study the laws of Torah. How could you connect on that? How could you be connecting to this idea that when a person is learning or even acting on the laws of the Torah, you're mamish living God's wisdom, because God's showing us how to do every part of our life. So first, Yaakov has to bring a consciousness. You can't just go about saying, okay, this is how you exchange your donkey because God said so. He has to reveal the consciousness of who we are, what we're doing here. He has to go back all the way to the beginning. First, he has to take us out of our space, of the way God is in the world, to the encompassing energy outside our space. He elevates the monument, because not seifim tchilas, and you have to bring the end back to the beginning. And then when you do that, you bring the beginning back to the end. Meaning first you have to take what's separate and bring a consciousness of the yud, of the oneness, and then you could take that oneness and bring it down to all the separation, all the happenings of the existence of the world. And he's able to bring it all the way down. Okay, so then we're going to go a little further. That's what Yaakov is doing. But then Yaakov goes and he says, he makes a vow to God that this is a hard job. This is what our life is, to go out there, and especially not just to do it in Beersheba, we have to do it in Charan. So he makes a vow. If I could come back from this journey in life, which is very difficult. I mean, just thinking about it, it's difficult. To have this consciousness, not just a consciousness when we are separate, but to bring that consciousness back into our day-to-day lives, into our every happening of our life, that's a journey. And Yaakov says, if I want to come back complete from that journey. It's difficult. There could be a lot of consequences. There could be a lot of things. Not everything is going to go according to plan. So he says, if I could return home complete from this journey back to my father's home, then Havaya is going to be Elikim. What does that mean? Like the Yud Kei Vav Kei is going to be like Elikim. What's Yaakov saying? That from then, I'm basically elevating that mimata l'mayla, from below up, to bring up, elevate the separation. L'mayla, and afterwards to make from the Yud back to Vav, to make the monument, and to pour the oil, the consciousness, all the way into every existence. And not just that's the dry law, but you're alive with this is God's wisdom. He brings it up to his head and then he pours the oil on it. Who's Avi? Who's his father? His father is Yitzchak. Like it says, when Mashiach comes. So when Yaakov makes this tefillah, that it's not just a prayer. For Yaakov specifically, that after 22 years of him being in the house of Lava, and he should come back to his father in peace. Which is also, that's the literal translation of the prayer. But also it's the prayer on behalf of the Jewish people. Throughout the diaspora, throughout all the times, King David, destruction, the first temple, the second temple, from that whole journey, that when I go back to my father's home, meaning when Mashiach comes. Because we know Mashiach comes, we're going to say, Ki ata avinu. Yitzchak is, we're going to say, you're our father. Why? Shadlas love, when Mashiach comes, Yemir al Yitzchak ki ata avinu. We're going to say, Yitzchak, you're our father. Like we've learned before, Yitzchak represents the laughter and the pleasure. Like it says, that is the pleasure and the laughter. Whoever is going to hear Yitzchakli is going to laugh. It's going to happen. Yitzchak means futuristic. When Mashiach comes, we're going to be revealed to us. the great pleasure that God had in this avoda, this journey that Yaakov did. On us going down to the world. And how do we go about transforming this world and bringing the consciousness? There's different levels. Sometimes we're going to have to restrain ourselves. It means we know it, but we're being pulled towards the other side. So we have to restrain ourselves. That's a skafia. And eventually v'hisabcha, to transform ourselves. It's no longer a pull, and it's no longer negative energy. We turn that energy around to be transformed to holiness. From darkness to light. Is canal, as they've said before, through the elevations, that Yaakov turned all the stones into one stone, then brought it back down. And that is what it means when Mashiach comes after the whole journey. What does it mean that I return complete on my journey, the Jewish people's journey through life, to the pleasure God had in the whole avodah, the whole story? And why is this God's pleasure? Because how do you define pleasure? Pleasure is something that's a chap, something special, something unexpected. This is the famous idea, and again, the Mittler Rebbe goes about it much more in detail. What gives a person pleasure and laughter is something, it's a chiddush, something unique, an idea, someone does something funny, because it's something, it means there's a lot of things that are happening in our life that are fascinating, but it's regular. There's no shinu, there's no change. What brings a person laughter and pleasure is a change. The example given is the parrot. A parrot says one word, everyone gets excited. People say words all the time. Why do people don't start clapping? When imagine you put a person up and said, mimic the parrot. It's a waste of money and time. But if you see a parrot doing it, that's a chiddush, because birds shouldn't be speaking. It's not its nature to speak. If a person speaks, you're not going to get pleasure seeing someone speak. If a person decided, I'm going to go around being a parrot, no one's interested. But if a parrot does it, it's exciting, I'll pay for it. Because the person always speaks. So to God. The chiddush is we're like parrots. The chiddush is to make this world into a godly place. That's a chiddush for God. That's something special. That's unheard of. It's unheard of to be able to make this world into a godly place. And that's what it means that when we return complete for our mission, we go back to Yitzchak, Beis Avi, is the pleasure God has in the Chiddush, that we were able to take this separate world and make it into Beis Elokim, a place of God. To bring the Yud down to the heel, all the way down, even to the heel. That itself is a Chiddush. He's able to go down to all the chains. That things that came into existence and were separate. Limited, separate. Separate creations. They feel like I'm something. So much so that you come into Shenikra Charon. He goes all the way. It means Yaakov goes to the darkest place. Chorin is nichar groini. It's like the narrow, and we learn about this throughout the next few parshas. The nichan, the groini, the throat, that narrows the voice to articulate an idea. That's why the neck is the narrow part between the head and the torso. And in that narrowness, limited, mechusa, mustar, it's concealed. Until they could create something separate. The chayshich and dark. In an absolute way. So much so that the voice, so to say, creates something that thinks that it exists on its own. So much so that Paro could even understand that there's a God, but it doesn't separate him from saying that I'm also a God. And Paro says, there's a God, but I'm also a God. So that's so separate. Person doesn't know there's a concept of God is one thing. I know God, right? But I'm also God. That's such a separate concept. It's all these silence. The throat doesn't always have to speak. What was the purpose of godliness going down to such a low, dark place and separation? Because that's the tzchaik, that's the pleasure Elokim. That's what it says. Tzchaik asili Elokim. Elokim, the name of Elokim is the world of separation. Is the name of God that conceals itself in nature. And the true tzchaik, the true laughter God gets is from Elokim, is from the world of separation, from that dark place to find God. How do you do it? Sometimes you have to restrain yourself. The only way you could connect, because there's so much darkness, so much pull, so much gravity going towards the darkness, is you just have to push and control yourself. Iskafia, restrain yourself. And then eventually, even stronger than that is isapcha, to transform the chshaycha, the darkness, l'nahira. Lahapich is kol amidis rais. And what does that mean? Not just the outside world, but inside of you. All your bad attributes, your bad desires, your ego, your kavod, respect, all these, my honor was bruised. I'm not being recognized. That's all the teva. That's all that's inside of you. That's all darkness. Shem avav rishbi eshel heva ha'olam. The love you have for the world, worldly things, or kas, or the anger. Charn is anger. Anger is a result of something, of your ego, a result of your space. Lahapchem shirak l'Hashem, that all that should only be for godliness. That again, that Yaakov reconnects everything to the Yud. It's a long process. It's a hard journey. That it should all be for godliness. You shouldn't be separate. That's what it means to return. And he says, he continues, I'm going to stop here, we're going to say it outside, the idea of that there's certain, that's why we have certain letters or words that they mean totally opposite things. For instance, matzah and chametz. Chametz is leaven, which is forbidden in Pesach, which makes up the letters ches, mem, tzadik. And matzah is the same, almost the same letters. Mem, tzadik, matzah. And instead of the ches, which is the same shape as the hay, is the hay. And the difference between the ches and the hay is, the ches is totally closed. It doesn't give any space for, it doesn't give any release. There's no humility. The hay has only a short leg on the left. That opening on the top is the place where there's humility. So if you just have humility, you could turn what's ego, what's bread that's rising, to bread that's humble. It comes to lechem oini, a poor man's bread. It means poor of one's ego. From charon, which is also ches, reish, nun, same three letters, but just the nun and the reish. And here we have rina, from anger to happiness. The difference is the ches and the hay again. The difference between a person being happy in life or being angry in life, it's not two different experiences. It's in the same word. You just have to break the ches, that locked in, that self. Why are you angry? What makes you so angry? What got to you? It's you're locked in yourself. If you make a little space from the ches to hay, all of a sudden from choron, from anger comes happiness. And that's the idea of Yaakov, is to change things. And then he says the idea is that if I'm going to return to my father's home, then he says, then what was Yudke Vavke, all this journey of bringing the light down is going to be Beis Elokim. It's going to only be the house of Elokim. That I'm going to elevate to even a higher level when Mashiach comes. That what seemed to me as beyond reach is going to become the norm. And now beyond reach comes something much greater. Again, the beautiful Maamar, very fundamental, much more explained by his son, the Bala Simcha of this week of the Mittel Rebbe. I wish everyone shkoch for joining. Wish everyone a good week. A lot to think about. A lot of avoda. And Hatzlach Rabbi. Have a great, wonderful week and still good chodesh. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.